Okay. Welcome to Pej's Recovery Corner. We are here today with Gina Tabrizy. So happy to finally. What? So, welcome to the corner. Actually, I'm at your corner.
Yes,
because this is Harmony Heals.
Yes, you are.
But there's
my
a corner.
Neck of the woods.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm delighted to have you on today. I've been wanting to have you on here for a while. I'm a friend of yours and your husband's for a few years now, and you're a powerful force in the field.
Yeah, thank you.
Definitely. I've seen you speak publicly, and I know that just when it comes to therapy, and we were talking about this before the broadcast, that you're different when it comes to therapy. First, I want to learn about you first. Like,
okay,
who's Gina? Like, where are you from? What's your nationality? Where'd you grow up? All that stuff.
I'm happy to tell you whatever you want to talk about. I'm not really shy. So where am I from? I was born in New York.
Okay.
So some of the fires started there.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were Cuban, so I consider myself Cuban American, although I was born in the United States in New York City.
New York?
New York.
So originally in New York. Huh?
Yeah, and then we moved down to Miami. So I grew up as a kid in Miami. I spent the majority of my life until my 20s in Miami. And then I moved out here. I think I was around 25-ish.
Okay.
I've been here about more than 30 years now. So that
out here
tells you my age if you want to do the math. But yeah, so I've been in California the rest of the time. So I have the Latin roots. I certainly have all of that passion and fire and all of the good stuff that goes with it. Some of the not so good stuff.
Right.
That I've had to work out in therapy, and I come by it honestly. I work on myself. And
if I'm not mistaken, you are a recovered codependent.
Dear God, I'd love to coin the term recovered. Because I feel like I feel like the only area left for me is with my own children,
right?
And that makes sense to me.
That's usually where codependence runs rampant. Is within the family system.
And as a parent, it's so very painfully difficult when they're struggling or they're hurting and in pain not to put my hands on it.
Mm-hmm.
So really, that's the one area that I can still get pulled into that behavior very easily.
Sure.
But anywhere else in my life, it's just a no-fly zone when it comes to codependency. I think I went into my recovery around 1987.
Okay.
And so again, do the math there.
Went into recovery for
my codependency. Yeah. Okay. So that meant going to CODA meetings. That meant going to codependency groups. That meant staying in therapy and doing that.
They had CODA way back then.
Oh, yeah.
In the 80s.
CODA. Yeah, they had CODA. I mean, that's when it grew up. Right. So, Pia Melody, who I've gone and had training with, and Claudia Black also, and John Bradshaw. Those were the gurus in the 80s that put on the map family systems around addiction and codependency. They made that a known thing.
Right.
And healing trauma, of course, which is the love and the passion of my entire career is around healing trauma. So you can't have that without having addiction and codependency. They breed, that pain breeds those maladaptive behaviors, and that's what it is.
So you said you grew up in Florida. Was drugs ever or alcohol ever in your story? Did you experiment?
In the 80s.
Yeah. How could you
Scarface.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Montana,
Miami.
those are my people. Everywhere you went, I went to go party, and I didn't know nothing from drugs. And I go to this party, Coral Gables. It's a very nice place. A lot of money, and I walk in a room and a glass table, and there's this big white mountain. I'm like, who's gonna bake a cake? I don't know. And then they tell me it's a cocaine. That's the first time I ever saw cocaine. And I was, mortified. I was terrified because I was like, what the?
Yeah.
But it was so rampant. It was intrinsically inherent in the culture at that time.
Right.
Unfortunately, what happened was, some people don't know the story. Castro, it's called the Mariel Boat Lift. So during that time, Castro said, well, if you want my people to go, then here, have my people. But what he did was release the prisoners and the psychiatric patients. He put them on boats and said, go, you're free to go, and sent them to where? Miami, because it's 50 miles away.
Right.
So they landed in Miami and built a crime syndicate. So Tony Montana is not too far off from reality with a little Hollywood flavor to it. But drugs were everywhere. When I was in high school, I mean, I was a pretty straight-laced kid. I was an honor student. I was in band. I was in student council. Like, I hit all the bells and whistles, like, be that perfect kid or whatever. And that's because my brother was going deep into his addiction. And
older brother or younger brother?
He's older. He's 3 years older than me, Paul. Hey, Paul, calling you out again on social media. One of these days you're going to come back, call me out. So I had such a strong need for validation from my brother. And that's where the codependency gets immersed. And a lot of that comes from my father, who was an incredible man. But my father traveled a lot when I was young for business. And then my father has a heart attack, and it changes his life and my life forever. But in that interim where I feel the absence of my father, I'm clinging on to my brother, and I'm following him to every party, to every drug, to every possible scenario that could put me at risk. And so what happened for me was I did it so that he'd like me. And I did it so I could have fun with my brother. I never picked up that this is what I got to do now thing. And I remember just having a realization, hanging out with some friends, and they were smoking pot. And I was like, oh, let's see how long, how many days in a row we can smoke pot. Some stupid kid thing over the summer. And I remember as I did that, at the end of about 35 days, I think it was, I started looking at the calendar at my girlfriend's house, and I go, have we seriously been doing this for 35 days? And she's like, oh, she thought it was great. And I went, this is the stupidest thing I have ever done. And I got up and walked out of her house, and I didn't do it again. Just
like a major self-realization, like, I just don't want to do this.
It was just stupid. Again, I was doing it
to please
someone, to have friends, to feel connected. That's codependency. And people, they question that, but I want you to know that it's a known thing in women. Women are more likely to go into substance use after a partner. A woman is more likely to relapse in a relationship if her partner uses, because we're inherently conditioned to do that codependency thing, to nurture, to partner, to couple, to breed. All of that stuff is inherent in us, so we have to watch that. So the blessing for me was I was able to do that and never picked back up. It was never the ism for me yet. I had some of the trait, but it never got there. And then it never did,
it's really interesting. Like, I love that the lingo that I'm sure ism is used in clinical terms. But that's what we talk about in alcoholism, or
of course,
addiction, many things like that. So you said that you were an honor student in high school, right?
Yes.
Was in your family system, was your dad strict? Like, he said, you better do good in school? Was that why?
Yes.
Or were you just a brainiac? Were you just smart?
Well, I'm a little bit of a nerd.
Okay.
I don't portray that in real life. And most people don't know that, but seriously, there's a very nerdy aspect of me. Like, I love spelling. I love to know a lot of words and be able to teach people words. And I did the spelling bee and all that.
So did I.
Yeah.
I didn't say I won it. I did it.
So
no, I was really big on spelling.
Yeah.
I still am.
Yeah.
Punctuation and things like that.
Me too.
I noticed shit.
Me too.
Your, and your.
Yes. Get it right. Get it straight, right? We were all taught in school. So I do have that. I did love books, but when I think about it, where I suffered in my self-esteem, books were an escape for me. Knowledge was a way to heal myself. I thank God I had that.
Some people get lost in the books.
And I just kept going. And of course, as a codependent, I needed validation. So I could study, and I'm getting the good grades, and I'm there somewhere. I'm getting that validation. It was enough for me to want it and to keep going back to that, which is healthy, that was certainly a healthy outlet for me, and then it just continued through school. I wanted to study psychology. I'm so fascinated by people.
Why?
I always have.
Why did you want to? Why did you want to study psychology?
Well, Pej,
to help fools like me. No, I mean,
to help myself.
It's really interesting. Like, I meet a lot of people that they love to go and study psychology. Some say because they want to learn about themselves. So was that the original reason?
I think if people are honest with themselves, everyone goes into it for that
to learn.
Reason. But they will say, I'm going to learn about my family.
And
everybody else.
Sure.
And what everybody else did. I didn't start live on my Facebook.
Oh.
What a dumbass. Oh, I just said that. Inevitably, I always will. There has to be a curse word.
That's okay.
So there you go. Hey, guys, sorry you missed half of the podcast with me and Pej. So check out Pej's Recovery Corner. I wrote it up there for you, or Pejman on Facebook. We're going live. We're talking
what a great supporter.
About codependency and all my favorite things, right? So I'm sorry you missed the first part, but you can go back and get it. So
college.
So college, 20s. Learning, studying helped me have an outlet. It's when I started studying in my undergrad, actually, in my bachelor's, that I start recognizing the codependent behavior. It was not named codependency yet. There was no name for that. So it might look like some of the other disorders that you kind of labeled that we would talk about today. It kind of looked a little borderline-ish and with a flavor of narcissism, which is weird, me thinking about it now, but later it was coined as codependency, but it was causing me a lot of pain. And at that time, I married a very abusive man.
Okay.
And so that's when it really comes to light. No, not my husband now.
Yes.
My first husband, very short-lived 2-year marriage and 4-year relationship. But school was an escape. School was healing for me. School was a way to understand and to get by, where the drugs did not do that for me. And the alcohol that worked.
You were going to school, like in your early 20s?
I graduated when I was 17 and I went straight to University of Miami. So between 17 to 21, I'm married by the time I'm 21.
Okay. I graduate in Miami.
I graduate and I get married a week later.
Wow.
Yeah. Total insanity. I think I just wanted to leave home, and I was a Latina. And you don't leave home not married for some unknown reason. Right. Today I go, why not? You know, I had no role model for that. Every single one of my cousins left their parents home married. So all of a sudden I had this pressure that that's what I was supposed to do. And I get asked, and stupidly I think, oh, I can't say no because I'm a codependent. You don't say no.
To marriage?
Yeah.
So you just
So internally I panicked, but externally I was
feel
like,
bad if you say no. Yeah.
I might hurt his feelings for God's sake. I mean, that's how sick it is, and it sounds so stupid and simple. And those of you who don't understand the crippling pain of that is, I won't exist without someone else's validation. So it's like that's death for me.
Right.
Yeah. At that time, it's so crippling.
Question for you. I mean, and you've been working in the field for so long, you know this stuff. Yeah. Is codependency selfish? Is the codependent selfish?
So the secret that
because
most people don't know,
they'll never feel right unless right.
So codependency is very self-serving.
Self-serving. So that's selfish.
Yes. So what it looks like is people think it's, you know, a disease of caring too much and being too altruistic, but it's all about control. I'm just being nice to you to control the effect it's going to have on me, because if you like me, I feel better about myself.
That's right.
So literally it's very
self-serving.
self-serving and very selfish in that regard, but most people don't know or understand that.
Right.
And it's very painful, trust, when you come to that realization and you realize you feel so out of control. And I know the addict relates to this. Right. I feel so out of control in my disease. How is this me controlling anything? And when you get to that place of recovery where you recognize I was controlling everyone around me in my maladaptive behavior, codependency is exactly the same. And I think it's why originally codependency was the person who's dependent on a person who's dependent on substances. I'm codependent to an addict or alcoholic. Now they've just expanded it to maladaptive behavior with anyone. Mostly if you come from any kind of dysfunction or trauma, this is going to show up, right? But just anyone. But originally it was, I'm addicted to you and you're addicted to substances. And so the sickness looks real similar. And I think it's why I always knew addicts, like, it's like I'm one of you in a different sense. You know, I have all of those isms, you know.
It's really interesting.
All those behaviors.
So I was at one time a client at CMX in his program.
Oh, yeah.
I met him when I was 30. I wanted nothing to do with him. I hated his guts. And then I ended up back at his program. Yeah. It was a place called New Life back in 2007. Right. And I remember that he would bring people in for different reasons. I was the addict. I was the addict alcoholic. Right. But he brought in somebody for primary codependency.
Okay.
And often he would have the codependent conversation with that individual, but it was in a group setting. So sometimes when he was talking to them, he would say, I'm not just talking to the individual, I'm talking to all of us, right? And so, for a while they're thinking like, well, he's talking to all of them, not me, right?
Me. Yeah.
And then one day in one of the groups, he said something along the lines of, Pej, you're codependent too. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? He goes, yeah, and you should actually go to a CODA meeting. This is after he'd assessed me for a little while of being a patient there, right? Sure. And then so I was like, this guy's mistaken. There's no way. Like the primary codependent that's here, that's the person that's codependent. Right. I'm not thinking that in our community, especially in the Persian community, I'm sure in the Cuban community too, and many communities. Yeah. Codependency runs rampant, right? I mean, and then on top of that, and we'll get to talking about narcissism and borderline. I mean, I think there might be a difference between like narcissistic behaviors, but I know in our family system, in our house, when my dad was very one-sided and would only see it one way, and he didn't listen to anything else, this could be portrayed as a narcissist, right? Which then I'm a carbon copy of my father. I'm going to, as much as I don't like the guy growing up, I love him, but I hate him, right? But there's a lot of stuff that he does that I will not, that I refuse to admit that I do those things too, when really I do those things. Right. I can be patronizing, I can be condescending, all the stuff that a Persian father does that has high expectations, right? Yes. And then on top of that, like throughout my life, like especially my recovery, I start dating women, and for some reason, I certain things happen in my relationships where they become complete shit shows. I'm talking like to the point where I have to go and I'm working in a treatment center. And I go find, I'm sure you know her, Sue, the Indian lady that does a lot of psychodramas.
I mentored Sue.
I'm sure you did. Yeah.
She will tell you that. She will say
she's a great lady.
One of her mentors. Yes.
I went to her one time and I said, Sue, I know I work here as a working in treatment, but could I just have
I'm losing it.
I'm losing it. Can I just talk to you? I sat with her in her office and I start talking about, I'm going out with this girl. This, that, and the other happens. I don't know how to deal with it. She goes, does she make you feel crazy? I'm like, Yes. She makes me feel really fucking crazy. I don't know how to handle myself. And she goes, sounds like she's got borderline personality disorder. Oh. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Of course, I left that office and went and Googled it. And now I'm looking it up. And my friend last week mentioned the word too. So now I need to learn.
Now you're like, I need to know this.
Then I get the book, I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. And and then lo and behold, the very person who I'm dating, I have a conversation with her. And in conversation, this thing comes up where I ask her, do you have borderline personality disorder? Like an idiot, right? But it didn't offend her because she said, "Oh, BPD." Like, I was diagnosed with that. Like, it's 18. I'm like, oh, whoa! Like I'm learning shit through my own experiences. So let's talk about that stuff because I know that I've worked in a lot of treatment centers since, and whenever you do, we sit in clinical meetings and they discuss the clients and they talk about they've got addiction, but they also have been diagnosed for borderline. Yeah. Or they
most addicts, I won't say all,
right,
for statistical reasons,
right,
and not to offend reasons,
right,
but most addicts have a co-occurring disorder or an underlying disorder because addiction doesn't live within its own, universe.
It's not like addiction. People just do drugs because they love it and become addicts. They probably have a lot of underlying shit.
There's always underlying issues of trauma or resentment or abandonment or fear, anxiety, depression, suicidality. There's a lot of stuff that happens underneath why someone chooses substances, and once they do that, they think it's the solution. So when you have that much pain, especially people who experience trauma early, the adverse childhood experiences is a big thing now.
Is that what, there's a scale what forms
that measures it? Yeah, it starts with that. It starts with that for most mental health disorders.
Okay.
So I definitely am in the school of Freud there, and Jung, and the psychoanalyst. I was trained psychoanalytically, psychodynamically, which always says go to the root, and the root is where you were born. The root isn't when I started using drugs.
Right.
What happened the 14 years before?
Sure.
What was formulating? Yeah. How were you developing as a human, and what were the messages you were receiving that you internalized?
Yes.
If you get enough enough of I'm not good enough, I don't matter,
right,
there's no place for me on this planet,
right.
then you're going to have significant pain and you're going to want to fill that void with something. So what happens with borderline personality disorder is they may or may not use substances.
Right.
Their pain may take them to self-mutilation or self-harm, where they cut or burn or slice, or
and a lot of people don't understand the science
or
behind why somebody would cut themselves, but that's to alleviate the pain. It's not like they're trying to cut themselves to commit suicide.
Well, it's terrifying. You know, people
Right.
see it. I've, you know, my whole career has been with post-traumatic stress, trauma survivors, severe, chronically, repeatedly traumatized people.
Right.
So they have dissociative identity disorder,
Sure.
which used to be multiple personality. I've treated many patients with that. It's more common than you would think, especially with severe trauma. And of course, substance use. I have never met someone with trauma that
Right.
did not addictively use something.
Right.
Not once, whether it's shopping or sex or gambling or computers
Right.
or drugs,
food,
it's on.
Right.
And so it's an outlet. I'm trying to feed the void in my soul, and nothing will feed it. And
Right.
by continuing to feed it, the brain chemistry then becomes altered. And then the brain starts setting off signals and the neurotransmitters going, this is good, so let's just keep doing this.
Right.
And a lot of people also don't understand, specifically dopamine, serotonin. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but serotonin levels are usually abnormal with borderline personality disorder and with addicts and alcoholics. So they're suffering something else. And it's usually some kind of depression or anxiety. Those are the two main ones, but
Right.
their serotonin levels, their dopamine levels are off. And those are the feel good neurotransmitters in the
Right.
brain. It's the natural sense of feeling good. And that's why too the substances come into play. Something within their
It's
chemistry starts to identify
Right.
that this might work for me.
It
So,
levels them.
yeah,
Yeah.
it levels them. So borderlines certainly have that. And they have a huge sense of betrayal.
Right.
And it's an attachment disorder. They did not bond with their primary caregivers, and they feel a sense of being neglected, rejected, and abandoned. That's at the core of every borderline personality.
And sometimes the rejection and that they think that they're feeling
is imagined.
It's not valid.
It's imagined.
It's just something, and that's why they feel less than.
That doesn't mean that it didn't happen in
Some
their
of it could have
roots.
happened, sure.
So
And it could be based off of like
Yeah.
things that parents say. Like,
very
just
minor
things like
infractions.
you'll never amount to anything,
Yes.
or you're not like your cousins because they're more
Yes.
educated.
I
than
got
you.
a lot of that.
So did I. But you know what? This is what I heard.
Right. This is what I heard.
It wasn't really like what
Yeah.
was real because
Yeah.
I'm talented in my own right. Like,
Right.
but I felt like
You internalize.
they always are making them seem like they're much better than me, and that
Right.
I'm a piece of shit.
Right.
And a lot of people will just program their mind to think
Right.
that they're pieces of shit
Yes.
when we're not pieces of shit.
Correct.
We're just humans,
Absolutely.
like, having a human experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So narcissism, you know, Marianne Williamson.
Of course. Yes.
So I've always admired her. To me, she's a powerhouse. She's just
Beautiful woman.
Beautiful
Yes.
woman. So I went
Yeah.
to one of her she was having before pandemic, she would have these open houses. You could go hear her speak for like 45 minutes. Then she'd come down to the crowd with
I
a
heard
microphone and
that.
talk and ask.
Yeah.
People would ask questions, and
Yeah.
she was quick to answer them. And she's like
Great.
just a wealth of knowledge, right?
Yes.
This lady asked her. She said, "My boyfriend is narcissist. He's a narcissist,
Right.
and he's this, that, and the other." She goes, hold up, wait right there. Let's just make sure that we're on the same page before we move any further forward.
Right.
I just want to you're saying he's a narcissist,
Right.
and someone could say that you're a narcissist. Someone could say I'm a narcissist, but first and foremost, let's make sure that when you say that, if he's clinically diagnosed with narcissism, there's a difference between somebody acting like a narcissist or having narcissistic behaviors,
having traits,
as opposed to really having a major narcissistic disorder. Now, she made it sound like, and maybe I was hearing it differently, that there's just no hope for the clinically diagnosed narcissist. Do you believe this? I mean, this is what I may have just heard, but is this true?
Well, I'm laughing because he will tell you that throughout my entire marriage of my husband, I have called him a narcissist. So if there's
current husband,
yes, my current
husband,
yeah. So he'll tell you, and his one of his pages is what compassionate narcissist. is one of his pages.
Hmm.
So, and
So you've diagnosed your husband?
No, hell no. He's self-diagnosed. I just keep affirming it. I'm like, yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Right.
And I say that not to belittle my husband or myself. I say that if I'm a fairly well-adjusted human being, the likelihood that I am with a full-blown narcissist is probably not,
Right.
but that my husband has some of those features, absolutely. And that my codependency probably operates in that space 100%. And that probably works out, right? My father very much was that. I think, he wouldn't have been clinically diagnosed, but he certainly could have, had a lot of the personality traits. He was very arrogant in a way. He was a beautiful man. He made an impression when he walked in a room. He was I think all those.
Sounds like my dad.
I think those best gifts of being on stage and speaking and having a presence, I got all that from my father. And I honor all that from my father. But my father was short-tempered and my father didn't have room for criticism. So those are the personality disorders aspects of it. There is no room to criticize a narcissist. They'll go 0 to 100. Their anger is potent.
Right.
If not explosive. That doesn't always mean they're violent. It just means they have no tolerance for anything that is a rejection of them or a criticism of them. And their expectations are greatly, greatly unattainable. So they will have expectations not for themselves only that's unattainable because it's perfectionism. They are obsessed with perfectionism. And so they then will place that expectation on anyone else around them, and they're unrelenting around their need for you to meet their expectation, and they will be greatly offended when you don't. And that's where a lot of the disorder lives. And that's the space where my husband doesn't have those.
Yeah, he's not that.
I don't meet his expectations all day long. A lot of time I'm like, I can't do it. I don't care, whatever, and he's still here. So had he had an intolerance for someone not doing it his way, we would never be together. Because honestly, I never do it Fareed's way.
Right.
In that regard.
I would never know that. From what I see, you guys are like the dynamic couple.
Well, that's how that works.
It's a beautiful relationship. I often.
Well, we're friends. So
I asked him, do you guys ever argue? And he's like, not really.
Well, we do.
About what, like meatloaf or some shit? Like,
like shit? Everybody. It's little stuff. The issue.
I mean, he doesn't eat meatloaf.
Right, me neither. So we do. We absolutely are normal in that regard. I think the thing that people see that they like or admire or respect is that we actually are friends.
Right.
So we met as friends and we hung out as friends.
For how long before you got married?
I hung out with him for a year as a friend. And the secret sauce to that, I'm really going to put this public, Fareed, because we tell everybody, is I thought Fareed was gay.
I still tell him he is.
Yeah.
But that's our inside joke.
He's very metrosexual and effeminate in some ways. And that's all right. But I came from Miami divorcing a very machismo, chauvinistic husband. And what he looked like in 1988, to me, the way he dressed,
I've seen his hair,
was very homosexual in demeanor and in manner, from what I understood in my, ignorance or whatever back then, y'all. So I'm not saying to offend, because
you'd be the last person to offend.
It's just that's what I understood to be gay. I grew up with this machismo father, like you don't wear pink, and there were certain stupid little rules that they had to wear. And my husband broke all of them. He had earrings, he had a man bag, he wore his pants really tight, and it wasn't skinny jeans yet, or not in style, but he had a very European flavor, and I had never met anyone like that. So we hung out as friends for a year. I thought he was my gay best friend, and then he disappointed me when I found out he wasn't.
He's straight.
He was super straight. So apparently he was dating everyone in the hospital that we worked at, and I had no clue.
God.
And they start telling me, because some of my friends start having crushes on my now husband, and then I'm like, girl, he's gay. And then they're like, no, he's not. And then I'm like, what? So it messed me up for a minute, because I was so angry about how I had been treated by my ex. I just hated all men. At that time, that was my man hating. And so Fareed needed to not be that, because I would have never let him in. And I completely trusted him. And then we spent another almost a year hanging out post me finding this out, and then ultimately start dating by the end of 1988. And then we didn't marry until 93.
Nice.
Yeah, we were engaged for 3 years.
Awesome.
We were just friends. I mean, we're super great friends. So that's really the foundation of it. Why he can tolerate whatever my codependency and all my idioms and I with his, because we're just friends. We got each other.
Do you think often somebody, like, let's say, for example, a male figure in a family system that's narcissistic or a narcissist, that create borderline children?
I think the narcissistic dad and the borderline mother. The one that I am sold on is the borderline mother. If a child is raised by a borderline mother, they stand very little chance of coming out without one of those disorders, crippling traits, if not the full-blown disorder, because I keep seeing that pattern. The wounding of the mother is critical in the borderline.
Okay, so then with that said, I mean, obviously
there's a lot more acceptance for the male figure to not be present, even in today's time, even though we have men coming in and they're the primary caregiver now, which is a beautiful thing. But still the norm is dad's out there making the bacon and hustling and supporting financially. And dad's all about the structure, the plumbing works, there's food on the table. And mom's all about babying, nurturing, all the emotional stuff. And that's still pretty true. We're still pretty much there now in this time. So some of that comes from just acceptance. Well, if dad's not there, then the one who's really influencing you emotionally is the mother. So when mom is unstable and has extreme mood swings, as a borderline will always have, you got a problem. That kid doesn't know how to regulate their own emotions.
They become a carbon copy.
Yeah, they become a carbon copy. Exactly.
Okay, so with that said, like you were saying, codependency wasn't even a label back then.
Even
which
on
then
the radar.
Probably, I mean, narcissism probably was, but I don't think borderline was, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think once I came in the field, I knew borderline was in the DSM, which is the diagnostic statistical manual that we use to diagnose.
So over the years, and I know that you guys created Harmony Heals many years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a counseling center, correct?
Yes, in the 90s. Early 90s.
Was it in Long Beach?
When we were dating. Yeah, so we started off in Long Beach. My husband, actually, you'll love this. Fareed actually had mugs made and t-shirts made before we even had an office. So we were working elsewhere, and he was already envisioning, because he's a visionary.
He's a visionary for sure.
And he envisioned Harmony before it came to being. So out of his little office, he was doing massage therapy at the time. He had the t-shirts and the mugs for Harmony, a Body, Mind, and Spirit Counseling Center, which was the original name for Harmony Heals.
And he mentioned that to me the other day. I love that. So was it holistic then?
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is we've been holistic since then, since 1990, because Fareed was and is, and myself, a martial artist, yogis. We practice physical fitness. I'm very into holistic healing, Tai Chi. We do Reiki. We do acupuncture, chiropractic, all that stuff. Herbal medicine. I'm addicted to essential oils, is my one addiction that I truly have.
Okay.
And so we have all that, and we had it back then.
Okay.
And so he brought in his martial arts and training and all that stuff, and then me with the psychology, but I believed in all that for my own personal healing. So since we had that, it made sense to us that the center would have to include holistic healing. And now everybody does it.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, people would call us and go, is this a cult? It was so weird and unheard of, holistic healing, that they would ask us if we were some kind of cult or it was some kind of religion when people would call in for intakes. Yeah. And we're like, no, it's just body, mind, and spirit. We're just going to feed all of it.
I love it. I actually love that. So then you guys eventually migrated and moved down to South Orange County, which then you got this building and all that. So over the years, you have worked with countless people.
Yeah.
I want to hear it from Gina. So, because Gina has her own show called Ask Gina, and you guys should always tune in. Where can they find us?
On Facebook, Ask Gina. On Instagram, it's Gina Tabrizy, my name.
Okay.
Tabrizy. And on TikTok, same thing, Gina Tabrizy.
We're gonna grow her TikTok presence. Watch,
Twitter,
it's gonna happen.
Yeah, YouTube.
So with the people that you've worked over the years, so many different types, so many people with so many disorders, right?
Yeah.
Is there, when it comes to borderline or when it comes to narcissism, can they be treated?
Absolutely, they can be treated.
Is it with medication?
It depends on the severity of some of the other co-occurring disorders, such as anxiety and depression and self-mutilation. Then yes.
Okay.
You know.
Have you seen a lot of success stories?
I have had a couple of patients that I would say, or clients that were narcissistic, whether they knew it or not. And I would say that they graduated from learning to be more empathetic and a more integrated human that understands how to integrate with other human beings and that aspect of it. And then with borderline personality as well, I'm not going to say it's not challenging. They're in therapy much longer. Right. It's a much slower process, requires a tremendous amount of patience on the part of the clinician.
Sure.
The most critical piece for the therapist, they have to have worked on their stuff, because a borderline will trigger all of those broken places in you that you have not visited. Yeah, sure. The countertransference is insane.
Yeah,
with borderline personality. So in my early days, I couldn't do it because my codependency was so dysregulated.
Right,
I couldn't work with a borderline. I would ultimately feel the same rejection they were feeling and the same sense of panic and fear. So in my more mature years, I was able to do it. You know,
the years of Gina Tabrizy mastery therapist.
Mastery therapy. Yeah, I think at 35 years in, and with everything I've done, I mean, I've worked.
You can separate.
I can say I'm at that mastery level of clinician. I mean, I worked inpatient psych. I've worked with children, pre-adolescent, adolescent, adult, all until the geriatric years. I've been program director, clinical supervisor over and over and over again. I wanted to eat it up. I wanted to know everything about every human. I didn't want to have any fear around it. I've worked with schizophrenic. I think multiple personality is still one of my favorites, and it's one of the most complex.
It's fascinating
to treat, but I'm absolutely fascinated.
I understand completely. I've worked in dual diagnosis treatment amongst people that hear voices that are convinced that they're the Antichrist.
And I want to say that if someone's listening, Pej and I, you got a joke. I mean, you have to think about coming in these rooms and dealing with horror on a daily basis. You got to think about, losing people that overdose or commit suicide, which I've certainly had. In my family as well as outside, and as a person who is treating people who have done so, I've lost a lot of people in these tragic ways. And if we can't have some humor about it, we will lose our sanity. So hear that with all the respect in my heart. Anything we've said, again, is not to offend in any way. And I'm not the be all end all. This is just my opinion for my 35-year clinical experience. And I want to say this, that to me, anyone who has a disorder that they had to develop in order to survive is actually brilliant. So a narcissist who believes they're brilliant, there is a level of brilliance in the adaptation of survival, which is exactly the same for the borderline. So please hear me say that you did what you had to do, much like a dissociative identity disorder. You had to develop other personalities to survive what you did. And to me, that's brilliant. So please know that about yourself while people are labeling you. And the fact that you're asking me this is very, it's very timely, because through my practice, I never diagnose my patients.
Right.
The only reason they've ever been diagnosed is I've been asked by insurance company to give it a label. Or the client literally came to me and said, what do I have? Do I have a diagnosis? And I go, well, let's find out.
Or do you just say, like, it looks like you have these types?
No, I'll go through the DSM with them, and I'll tell them what I think, and I'll say, does it fit? Do the symptoms fit?
Let them diagnose themselves.
No, I never label anybody, because as soon as you label them too, in some ways you cripple them. With borderline, with narcissist, I will say it's one of the times I will diagnose. You need that knowledge to understand, because it's a pervasive behavior over your life that's very difficult to change. Unlike other disorders that in the short term, they respond more quickly to therapy, right? So they need to understand. But the majority of people, as soon as you label them, then they live that label. And I'm going to go on the line of Marianne Williamson here and say the other aspect of my work is spiritual, is where I believe every human is capable of healing.
Absolutely.
Every human can come on this planet, do the worst things in their life, and they can heal from that.
Tap into
and
spirit.
Be totally integrated and whole and healthy and rejoice in being a human being and give something back. Every human being.
That's
I believe that, and I will always believe
There's the hope.
I will always believe that. So
it too.
Labeling them kind of shoots them in the foot. And I say, you're not that. I have never met an addict that I say, you're not an addict. That's what you did. It's not who you are. So stop calling yourself.
Not currently.
It's the only place where I'll differ from the 12 steps that I absolutely adore, that I speak and I spit out, which is why people think I'm an addict, because I've read the big book, because I've sat in meetings, because I believe it, because I embrace it, because it is the most tried and true method of recovery beyond any kind of therapy. I'm sorry, is the 12 steps. So you have to give it its due. But at the same time, I say, but that's what you do. It's not who you are, you know? So the repetition of I'm an addict, I get it and I applaud it, and it keeps you sober today, stay sober today. But in some vision of that, I'd like to say I was an addict, or addiction is what I do.
It's so interesting you
I'd
say
like
that,
to
'cause
say
I have
that.
a friend that's in the program.
Yeah.
Right? And now I guess I'll just,
I get to say,
here's my anonymity out the window, but it's really interesting that you say that, because my friend, I had been conditioned to calling myself an alcoholic.
An alcoholic.
Okay, constantly.
Addict and alcoholic.
And now when my friend, I saw him speak at a meeting and also speak in a room, and he identified as a grateful member of that 12-step program.
And that's great. And,
when he said that, I was waiting for the police, the AA police, to come and say, but are you an alcoholic? Right. So he takes me into the big book.
Right.
In the forewords, it says in one part of it, when we speak publicly, we identify as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Right. So he wasn't doing anything wrong.
Right.
He was actually doing what the book is suggesting. Right. So and then I thought to myself, if I grateful member, because if I was to say, like, I've come to the conclusion, and I learned it from him, because we talk about this extensively. We're not an alcoholic because we're not getting drunk right now.
Right.
We were an alcoholic. Right. But we are a grateful member of a group to help deal with alcoholism
that believes in sobriety and recovery.
That's right. Right. Exactly.
So I'm a sober member. I'm a grateful sober member. I'm sober today. I'd love for people to constantly repeat, I am sober. Even if you said I'm a sober addict today, or I'm a sober alcoholic today. And the reason I say that, I'm nobody to change the big book, which was divinely given to Bill. You know, divinely given to Bill. And so I am saying that we can always grow. And as spirits, and as you know, the human being is living out a spiritual life. Like, we're just the body encasing the spiritual experiences, right? Is what we say to ourselves sticks. So the more we affirm anything that has any negativity to it, the more we want to play that out. So in a way, it's allowing some freedom from the baggage of my past. It's like if you have to identify, I'm a sexual abuse survivor, I'm a sexual abuse survivor. Imagine how daunting that is and how heavy that is. So that's why, you know, you say I'm a survivor. You don't put in the, you know, and even that, I've gone beyond that to saying I'm a thriver. Like, I don't even want to say I'm a survivor anymore of any of the things that I've survived. Now I don't want to say I'm a thriver. Why? I took a tragic event in my life and I dissected it spiritually, and I turned it into something that's very powerful and healing. To me, that's thriving. That's actually my book. That's the whole premise of my book that's going to be coming out.
Are you okay to talk about the name of the book?
Yeah, it's Healing is a Love Story.
Okay. And it will be coming out soon?
Reimagining Trauma is the tagline. So it's going beyond just this event happened to me and now I'm a survivor, to this event happened to me to catapult my spirit into greatness, to become more of who I was meant to be, not less. And that doesn't happen when we go through life with only positive, good experiences. It comes from the hellhole that we crawl out of. That's when our soul is broken free. Whether that was an agreement we made before we came on the planet, I'm not going to get into, you know, the karma or, you know, past lives and all that stuff. I don't have an opinion on any of it. I'm open to whatever. Yeah. But I believe those experiences are there to push us into greatness, not so that we're less than, but that we're more than. And we didn't understand that about ourselves. For whatever reason, we didn't know that. I didn't know that, even though I was living that crippling codependent. I didn't know that till my ex-husband decimated my identity, and the person that I was no longer existed. That was my black hole. And when he did that, my soul broke free from there. I had to hit that bottom. I did not want to live. I didn't understand why I was here. And the depths of that took me out into, and brought me to California, and brought me here doing what I'm doing. It started with, you know, it goes before that, but that was really the big one for me. That was life-changing for me, because I wanted to die. And anytime you face death, as you know, there's two choices. You know, either get into acceptance of that, get busy dying, or get busy living.
I love it. You know, what's really cool is knowing you and the way that you present yourself, You have a strong personality.
Yes.
And I do too. I mean, I think I've toned it down a little bit over the years. I might just be getting old, but who knows? Maybe I still have it sometimes. But to see you be so transparent about your personal experience, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Now, as a therapist, obviously, and being a seasoned one that's done so much work with so many different people, do you think a therapist needs like a therapy from a therapist too? Sometimes
I would probably not trust a therapist that's never been to therapy. So all of my interns and myself included, I say, it doesn't mean you have to do it for your whole life.
Right.
I do checkups now, where I go in to see a therapist when I see that I'm being dysregulated around my behaviors. My codependency, my depression in particular haunts me. And I have to always keep that in check. And when I'm not managing with my tools, then I go in to see my therapist. I still do that. I still do that. I went back 2020. Who wasn't having to go to therapy in 2020 for God's sakes, So I wouldn't trust a clinician. I've done extensive retreats. The reason I do psychodrama, which is one of my absolute loves in group therapy, is because that was part of my healing. When I went into a psychodrama, it transformed me. And I feel like it saved my life. Like I could see in a psychodrama what I couldn't talk in one-on-one to a therapist, because I could talk circles and bullshit the therapist because I'm like, you're not going to get through, like I wanted them to prove themselves to me with my ego. But when I went in psychodrama, it catches you off guard. It's a role-playing exercise that becomes very alive and very real. And you feel like what you're acting out is actually happening, and it's very spontaneous. And when they did that to me, I didn't see where they were coming. So all of a sudden I was in it and it was happening before I knew I couldn't defend against it. And it was the first time that I publicly wept and just lost it. I was in tears on the floor with a bunch of other clinicians dealing with my inner child. And it was the first time I was introduced to the concept of inner child. And so I'm extremely passionate about it. I always share my story with my clients. I'm a big self-disclosure all the time. And I train all my clinicians to do it. I say, don't sit there and go, oh my God, you know what happened to me yesterday? It's not your therapy. But I always, when I look at them, I go, I know. And then they go, what do you know? And I go, I do know. I wanted to kill myself. I know what it's like to look at a window and go, just jump. I know that. So when I look at them and say that, there's a certain trust that immediately happens. So I don't have to spend years trying to build that trust, because they're going, you're real. You're telling me the truth. You're telling me you were a broken person that now feels healed. I can buy into that. To me, it's just bypassing a lot of extra work and building that rapport. And you're human. You're a human being first. You're a therapist somewhere down the road. Just be a person with another person giving what you have. Bring your knowledge in. Bring your boundaries in. I don't take them home. I don't nurse them. I don't feed them. I don't give them money. I don't break any rules. But when I'm in there, I'm 100% in there. But I'm in there, Gina. And the therapist is there to back me up. That's how I see therapy. And that's why I think it's so different. And what I'm teaching to my clinicians, and there's many out there that are practicing that went to the school of Gina, so to speak, and they'll tell you that I taught them, be you. The greatest thing you can give a client is being fully yourself and using your intuition, not your knowledge. Your gut will take you way further than those books will, because you can get lost in the books and wanting to be perfect, and you're emulating somebody else's method. Not
come from the heart, not from the head.
So just be you. Have the knowledge, but be you, and trust that. And you can't do that if you haven't gone to therapy and you haven't taken all that dirt out and looked at it and uncovered. You can't do it. You will have blinders on in the room with your clients if you don't see where they're coming from. I mean, I see them coming a mile away and I'm like, I got this. And it's not scary. But when you don't know, because you haven't looked at your own blind spots, then you're lost in that process,
Totally. I totally understand. Wow. This has been excellent. Like lots of good information, good conversation. So the book comes out when?
So it's in editing right now. We're up to chapter 3. It's written. I did my part. They're doing their part. So it's 10 chapters. So as soon as she can crank them out, I think in the next 2 months, I'm going to have a big book launching for that. And I have a training manual that's coming out simultaneously.
And the training manual is about?
The training manual is a method that I developed over the years as a therapist, and I borrowed from everything that I know. It's inner child, EMDR, psychodrama, hypnotherapy. all meshed into when I couldn't get a client to fit into one of these modalities. I went, let's start with EMDR. Well, let's go to inner child. Well, let's do some psychodrama. And I was able to do it in a 9-step process where you use all of these tools and you sit with the client and you very quickly get them into a cathartic state. So being able to emote, which the Achilles heel of all addicts and alcoholics is that they want to stay numb. And I don't have feelings, and I haven't had feelings for so long, and I wouldn't know a feeling if it hit me in the face. So this method, through the years of working with addicts and alcoholics and my trauma survivors who are dissociated, was how can I get them out of here and get them here quick and get them to start recognizing you're always feeling, you're just choosing to ignore what you're feeling. And this method does that. It's called emotional intuitive therapy.
I love it. I wanted to say, when you were talking about I love inner child work. I did that. It changed my life.
It is
life-changing. I'm an avid fan of EMDR. I believe in it. I think it's excellent work. But psychodrama, when you were talking about that, I just want you to know the reason that Pej is sitting sober in front of you and stayed sober is because I had a very powerful psychodrama experience. CMAC did it. It was amazing. It was life-changing. It was the biggest amount of trauma that I was carrying on my shoulders. It was guilt because somebody lost their life. I was in a car accident. I was driving that day. I carried this shit around for a long time. I remember being in the grips of my addiction, thinking I use because I never want to feel what the pain and the anguish and the sadness and all the shit that I've been accumulating over the years. So when we went through that process, the next day it was powerful, very powerful experience. But then, and I don't know, I don't think a lot of people always take it totally seriously or really give all of themselves to it, but I did. I was ready, you know. And I met CMAC 5 years before. I wanted nothing to do with him, but at the age of 36, it happened, and I woke up the next morning. I said, CMAC, I feel like 1,000 pounds has been lifted off my back.
That's what it feels like. Absolutely.
And that's when I had arrived. That was my ultimate turning point. That's what I said. I'm staying sober. I'm doing this all the way, and I want to help people. You know, he made me make a commitment during the cycle. He said, like, what do you want to do different? I said, I want to help addicts, alcoholics of every age, race, creed, and color, one day at a time for the rest of my life. I'm like, who the fuck said that? Like, that just came out of my mouth, right? Like, where did that come from?
That's the future that, you know, Moreno spoke of. If you can have someone, you know, walk through, he literally did it on stage. He's the founder of psychodrama, Jacob Moreno, in the 1930s. And he literally did it on a stage, you know, and he was a psychiatrist, which is so unusual now to think of how we practice psychiatry versus back in the day, they were the mentors of the field of psychology. They were mostly psychiatrists. So he did it on stage, and he believed that adaptability and spontaneity is the key to healing everything. If you can walk into a situation and adapt yourself to that new situation and come up with spontaneously with other outcomes and other solutions that you can heal. And if you think about it, that's what psychodrama does. It puts me in my worst scenario, and yet I find a way out. There is a solution. I see it. I grab onto it. That's grieving. That's letting go. That's yelling, screaming, crying, hitting, whatever. And when you have that emotional catharsis, which is part of the bell curve of psychodrama, it's a warm up, and then it's catharsis, and then it's closure, is in that when you come to the other side, all of a sudden you have these epiphanies. Oh my God, it's not my fault. Oh my God, I've been beating myself up for something that, you know, I'm powerless over, and I no longer need to do that. EMDR does the same thing.
Yes, it does.
It does the exact same thing like this. And hypnotherapy will do it too, and inner child work. So all I did was mesh those all together and put it in a soup, and I call it emotional intuitive therapy, and it's going to come out. It'll be a thing.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think we're going to sign off. Is there anything else you want to say to anybody out there?
Oh, God.
Where's the hope?
I know. I hope we gave you hope. I wanted to say that, you know, there, but by the grace of God go I, that we're here because of our own experiences. You know, I was blessed to really love school and want to learn and go and get all my credentials, but you don't have to do that to help someone on a daily basis. You just have to be willing to show up. And it's picking up a phone when your friend calls you, or your friend says, I'm struggling, and they want you to come over, and you're like, oh, I have this engagement and this commitment and I can't do it. And maybe Saturday, you know, anytime anyone says, I need help, please say yes. And that may be passing them a phone number, handing them over to Pej, calling me. That may be sitting with them for coffee. Just know that you can change a life by showing up when they ask for help, and just showing up in love is it. And that's all you need to do. And that life can transform. God knows how many lives Pej has transformed, because CMX showed up for him by way Transforming Life Healing Center. Shameless plug. He's our dear friend. Gina Tabrizy, I'm here because somebody extended a hand to me, and I've been able to extend it, to thousands. And that's why we do it. That's why we're here, and that's why we're doing it. Just know that. And follow me on social media.
That's right.
Ask Gina or Gina Tabrizy. And my radio show, Thursday nights, KOCIradio.com. It's on the internet. It's here local. It's at 8 p.m. every Thursday night with my buddy Steen Sellers.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys, whoever was tuning in today. We love you all. And until we meet again,
bye.